The smell of cigarettes clung to everything. It lived in the curtains, the floorboards, the seams of my pillow. Even my dreams reeked of it. That was my first memory of him. He sat in the living room, a silhouette against the dying light. His hair messy, black and streaked with early gray. His broad hands wrapped awkwardly around a tiny china teacup, something far too delicate for him. My mother hovered near the kitchen, nervous, laughing too loud. She wore a dress she hadn't worn in years. I stood halfway down the stairs, clinging to the banister. Watching. He didn't notice me at first. Or maybe he did and just didn't care. My mother called me down. I went, hesitantly, every step feeling heavier than the last. "This is Frank," she said. Her voice was bright. Forced. "He's going to be staying with us for a while." Frank didn't smile. Just nodded once, slow and stiff. His eyes were dark. They looked tired. No, more than tired. Hollow. I hated him immediately. I hated the way he sprawled across the couch like he owned it. The way his boots dirted the clean floor my mother scrubbed every morning. The way she looked at him. Like he was salvation. Like she was drowning and he'd thrown her a rope. That night, I lay awake listening to him cough. Listening to the floorboards creak under his weight as he moved around, restless. I imagined terrible things. Him hurting her. Him hurting me. I didn't know why my mind went there. I just knew that it felt safer to be ready for the worst. Days blurred into weeks. Frank started fixing things around the house. Leaky faucets, broken steps, the door that never closed right. He worked without speaking much. My mother fluttered around him, grateful, trying to help, but mostly just getting in his way. Sometimes, I'd catch him glancing at me. Not kindly. Not cruelly either. Just, like I was another broken thing in the house. Something he hadn't decided yet whether to fix or throw away. Once, I came home from school to find him alone in the kitchen, scrubbing burnt sauce off a pan. The sleeves of his flannel shirt were rolled up, revealing forearms crisscrossed with old scars. He looked up. Our eyes met. Neither of us said a word. I bolted to my room and slammed the door so hard a picture fell off the wall. I thought about him constantly. Hating him consumed me. The way his voice rumbled low in his chest when he spoke. The way his jaw clenched when my mother forgot to buy his brand of cigarettes. I hated how big he was. How small he made the house feel. How small he made me feel. But under the hate, something else grew. Curiosity, maybe. Or fascination. Late at night, I'd creep out of my room, just to peer at him asleep on the couch. His chest rising and falling. His face slack, almost boyish. There was something heartbreakingly lonely about him then. Something that made my throat ache. Once, during a thunderstorm, the power went out. I fumbled downstairs, trying to find candles, and found Frank sitting at the kitchen table, smoking in the dark. He jerked his chin at the chair across from him. A silent command. I sat. Because I was too scared not to. Because I was too tired to keep pretending I wasn't curious. He didn't speak for a long time. Just smoked, staring out the window at the rain. Then, in a voice so soft I almost missed it, he said, "You're tougher than you look, kid." I didn't know what to say. Nobody had ever called me tough before. I nodded, barely moving. He smiled then, just a little. A twist of the mouth. Like he was laughing at some private joke. For a second, he wasn't the stranger who ruined everything. He was just a man. Tired. Frayed at the edges. That scared me more than anything. Because I realized I wanted to know more. I wanted him to notice me again. I went back to my room that night and pressed my palm flat against the wall that separated us. Imagining I could feel the vibration of his breathing through the plaster. I cried. Not because I was sad. But because something inside me was changing, and I didn't know how to stop it. Frank became part of the house. Like the creaky stairs or the crooked windows. Something you got used to. Something you couldn't imagine living without, even if you hated it. He fixed my bike one afternoon without me asking. I watched from the porch as he bent over the frame, sleeves rolled, cigarette dangling from his lips. When he finished, he gave the seat a slap and said, "Good as new." I mumbled a thanks. Didn't meet his eyes. But later, when I rode that bike down the hill, the wind whipping my face, I felt something strange. Not anger. Not hate. Gratitude. Warm and confusing and terrifying. I didn't tell my mother. Didn't tell anyone. I tucked it away, deep inside, where I kept all the dangerous things. I thought I was still in control. That I could hate him enough to drown whatever else was stirring inside me. I was wrong. And by the time I realized it, it was already too late. The first time he touched me, it wasn't what you think. I had fallen. The kitchen floor was wet, soap suds everywhere, and my bare feet slipped out from under me. My elbow cracked hard against the tile. I cried out, more from shock than pain. Frank was there in an instant. His hands rough on my arms, lifting me too easily. He crouched down, one hand steadying my back, the other brushing my hair from my face. "You all right?" His voice low. Concerned. I nodded, too stunned to speak. His hand stayed on my back a second longer than it should have. Warm. Solid. When he finally let go, I felt colder than before. My mother rushed in, breathless, scolding me for being careless. Frank stood and backed away, lighting a cigarette with shaking fingers. I couldn't stop thinking about it. The way he had looked at me. The way my body had burned where he touched it. I told myself it was nothing. That I was imagining it. I had to be imagining it. Because the alternative was too dangerous. Summer crept in, heavy and slow. Frank started working late nights. Sometimes not coming home until morning. When he was gone, the house felt empty. Echoing. I hated how much I noticed. I hated how I started listening for the sound of his truck in the driveway. How my heart would stutter when I heard it. How I would pretend to be asleep when he came in, even though every nerve in my body strained toward him. One night, I heard him come in late. I heard the door creak. His boots thud against the floor. The soft clink of keys dropped on the counter. But instead of going to the couch, he came upstairs. I lay rigid in bed, clutching the covers to my chest. His footsteps paused outside my door. I held my breath. Seconds stretched into a lifetime. Then, finally, he moved on. To the bathroom. The toilet flushed. Water ran. I let out a shuddering breath, my heart pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. The next morning, he acted like nothing had happened. But something had. Even if only inside me. Something had shifted. Cracked open. I started finding excuses to be near him. Asking for help fixing things. Lingering in the kitchen when he cooked. Laughing at jokes that weren't funny. And sometimes, just sometimes, I caught him looking back at me. A quick glance. A flash of something hungry, before he turned away. It scared me. It thrilled me. I knew it was wrong. But wrong things have their own gravity. They pull at you. Slow. Relentless. Until you're standing right at the edge, staring down, daring yourself to fall. One evening, my mother had to work late. She asked Frank to make dinner. It was just the two of us. The kitchen smelled like burnt garlic and frying oil. He opened a beer. Offered me a sip. I hesitated. Then nodded. The beer was bitter. Warm. I gagged a little, and he laughed, really laughed, for the first time. It wasn't a cruel laugh. It was soft. Tired. Like he was remembering how to do it. "You're a tough one," he said again, the same words from the storm night. Something in me crumbled. I smiled. A real smile. We ate in silence, the air thick between us. The only sounds were the clink of forks against plates, the hum of the fridge. After dinner, I helped him clean up. We moved around each other in the small kitchen, our bodies brushing once, twice. Each accidental touch sending electric shocks through me. He handed me a plate to dry. Our fingers touched. I dropped the plate. It shattered on the floor. For a moment, we both froze. Then he reached out. His hand cupped my face. Gentle. Careful. Like he thought I might break just like the plate. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. His thumb brushed my cheekbone, feather-light. I closed my eyes. Waiting. Wanting. But he let go. Just like that. Stepped back. Lit a cigarette with shaking hands. Told me to go to my room. His voice rough. I went. Not because I was afraid. But because I wasn't sure what would happen if I stayed. That night, I cried into my pillow. Not from sadness. But from something deeper. Something raw and clawing inside me. It wasn't hate anymore. It wasn't even anger. It was need. And it terrified me. The next morning, there were 2 cigarettes crushed out in the ashtray instead of 1. And a fresh, untouched plate set carefully at my spot at the table. A peace offering. A line drawn in the sand. I didn't know which side I was supposed to stand on. But even then, deep down, I think I knew. I had already crossed it. Something changed after that night. He barely looked at me anymore. When I spoke, he answered in one-word sentences. When I entered a room, he found an excuse to leave. It hurt. More than it should have. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself it was better this way. I told myself a lot of things. But at night, when the house was dark and silent, the lies peeled away. And what was left was ugly. Raw. Starving. I started picking fights with him. Little things. Leaving my shoes in the hallway. Forgetting to do the dishes. Talking back when he corrected me. He never rose to the bait. Just watched me. His jaw tight. His fists clenching and unclenching like he was fighting something invisible. One afternoon, I stayed late at school just to avoid him. When I finally dragged myself home, the sky was already bruising with sunset. I found him on the porch. Smoking. He didn't say a word as I climbed the steps. I brushed past him, shoulders stiff. He grabbed my wrist. Not hard. But firm enough that I had to stop. I turned. Our eyes met. He looked so tired. So lost. Like he hated himself for touching me at all. You think you know everything, don't you? He said. His voice was low. Bitter. I yanked my arm free. Stormed inside. Slammed the door behind me. But my heart was racing. Not from fear. From something far worse. The truth was, I wanted him to chase me. I wanted him to lose control. And that realization made me sick to my stomach. The next few days blurred together. Frank and I orbited each other like planets caught in a dying sun's pull. Close enough to burn. Too afraid to touch. My mother noticed. Of course she did. How could she not? You and Frank okay? She asked one night, sipping wine at the kitchen counter. I shrugged. Poked at my food. He's been distant lately, she said, frowning. I don't know what's wrong with him. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because deep down, I knew exactly what was wrong. And I was the cause. The guilt gnawed at me. Chewed holes in my chest. But still I kept pushing. One night, when my mother was working late again, I came downstairs wearing one of her old shirts. Too big. Slipping off my shoulder. Bare legs. Bare feet. I told myself it was innocent. I told myself it didn't mean anything. Frank was in the living room, fixing the leg of the coffee table. He looked up. Saw me. And for the first time in weeks, he didn't look away. The air between us thickened. Heavy. Electric. I crossed the room slowly. Pretended to examine the tools scattered across the floor. You need help? I asked, voice soft. He didn't move. Didn't speak. I knelt down beside him. Close enough that I could smell the smoke on his clothes. Close enough to feel the heat coming off his skin. I reached for a wrench. My hand brushed his. He flinched like I'd burned him. Go to bed, he rasped. Not an order. A plea. I didn't move. He dropped the wrench. Scrubbed his hands over his face. You don't know what you're doing, he said. His voice cracked on the last word. Maybe I do, I whispered. Silence. The kind of silence that screams. The kind that leaves scars. He stood up abruptly. Towering over me. His fists clenched at his sides. For a second, I thought. Maybe. But he just turned and walked away. Left the tools scattered. Left me kneeling on the floor. Left the weight of what almost happened pressing down on my chest until I could barely breathe. I sat there long after he was gone. Listening to the sound of him moving upstairs. Pacing. Slamming doors. Breaking, quietly, behind walls too thin to hide anything. I should have felt relieved. I should have felt ashamed. Instead, I felt abandoned. Worse. I felt angry. Because somewhere in that twisted part of me, I wanted him to stay. Wanted him to stop pretending. Wanted him to choose me. The realization hit me like a punch. Left me gasping. I wasn't a child anymore. Not really. But I wasn't a woman either. I was something in between. Something dangerous. Something that could destroy us both. And part of me, a small, wicked part, wanted exactly that. The days after that were unbearable. Frank barely spoke to me. Barely looked at me. The distance between us grew wider. Colder. But it didn't make the wanting go away. It made it worse. I spent hours alone in my room. Listening to the creak of the house settling. Waiting for footsteps that never came. Waiting for a knock that never sounded. I started looking through old boxes in the attic. Anything to fill the aching hours. Anything to drown out the hunger clawing inside me. That's when I found it. An old photo album. Dusty. Forgotten. I wiped it clean with the hem of my shirt. Flipped it open. There was my mother, smiling too wide. And Frank, standing stiffly beside her. His arm around her shoulders. His hand barely touching. He looked younger. But not happier. There was a hardness in his eyes even then. A tension in his mouth. Like he was posing for a life he didn't really want. Page after page. Birthday parties. Holidays. Vacations. Frank was always there. But never really there. And then, a picture I had never seen before. Frank. Holding a little girl. Not me. Someone else. The girl had dark hair. Big, solemn eyes. She clung to him like he was the only thing keeping her from floating away. I stared at the picture, something cold curling in my stomach. On the back, in faded ink, a name. Emily, 5 years old. Emily. I didn't know an Emily. My mother never mentioned her. I shoved the album back into the box. Closed the attic door with shaking hands. That night, at dinner, I couldn't stop looking at Frank. At the way he kept his eyes down. At the way his hand trembled slightly when he lifted his fork. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Who's Emily?" I asked. The fork clattered from his hand. Landed on the plate with a sharp, ugly sound. Silence. Dense. Suffocating. He didn't look at me. Didn't answer. My mother froze, mid-bite. Her face drained of color. She set her fork down slowly. Carefully. "Where did you hear that name?" she asked. Her voice was too calm. Too careful. "I found an old picture," I said. My own voice sounded strange. Hollow. Frank pushed back from the table. The chair scraping loud against the floor. He walked out without a word. I wanted to go after him. But I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. My mother sighed. Closed her eyes. "Emily was his daughter," she said finally. Each word like a nail hammered into my chest. "Daughter?" I echoed, numb. "Before me," she said. "Before us." I waited. But she didn't say more. Didn't explain why there were no pictures of her past the age of 5. Didn't explain the grief that had wrapped itself around Frank like a second skin. I didn't dare ask. Later that night, I heard Frank outside. Chopping wood. Even though it was too warm for a fire. The rhythmic crack of the axe splitting logs filled the air. Violent. Desperate. I crept out onto the porch. Watched him from the shadows. Sweat soaked through his shirt. His muscles strained with every swing. Like he was trying to split himself open. Bleed something out that wouldn't leave. The moonlight caught on the blade. On his face. And for a moment, he didn't look like Frank. He looked like a man drowning on dry land. I stepped off the porch. Walked toward him before I could think better of it. He saw me. Stopped. The axe hung limp in his hand. We stared at each other. Two broken things, orbiting closer, closer, until crashing was inevitable. "I'm sorry," I said, though I wasn't sure what for. For asking. For knowing. For wanting. He dropped the axe. Ran a hand over his face. "You don't understand," he said. His voice raw. "Then make me," I whispered. He laughed. A terrible, hollow sound. "You're just a kid," he said. "No," I said. "Not anymore." The words hung between us. Heavy. Trembling. He shook his head. Turned away. But he didn't leave. Instead, he sank to the ground. Sat there, knees bent, hands hanging loose between them. Broken. I sat beside him. Close enough that our shoulders brushed. We didn't speak. We didn't move. Just two ghosts, sitting in the dark, bound together by all the things we couldn't say. I wanted to reach for him. To fix him. To save him. But maybe some people didn't want saving. Maybe some people only knew how to hurt. And be hurt in return. When I finally looked at him, his face was turned toward the sky. Eyes closed. Mouth moving silently. Like he was praying for something. Or begging for forgiveness he knew he'd never get. I didn't ask. I didn't need to. Because whatever prayer he was whispering, I knew it wasn't for me. It was for a ghost named Emily. A ghost that would always stand between us. And still I wanted him. Maybe that was the worst part. Not that he was broken. But that I loved him for it. After that night, something between us cracked. The silence wasn't safe anymore. It was charged. Trembling. Every glance lasted too long. Every touch lingered too close. I told myself it was harmless. I told myself I could handle it. But the truth was, I was slipping. And he was slipping with me. One evening, it rained. A hard, punishing rain that battered the windows and soaked the ground in minutes. My mother was out again. Working late. She always worked late these days. I found Frank in the kitchen, staring out at the storm. His hands were braced on the counter, his shoulders stiff. I stood in the doorway, watching him. Watching the way the light from the street lamps carved shadows along his arms. Watching the way he breathed, shallow and ragged. Something inside me ached. I crossed the room. Slowly. He didn't turn around. I reached out. Touched his back, just lightly. He flinched. But he didn't pull away. We stood there like that for a long time. The rain hammering the world outside. The silence hammering the world inside. Finally, he spoke. "You shouldn't," he said, voice hoarse. "I know," I whispered. Still, I didn't move my hand. Still, he didn't step away. He turned slowly. Faced me. Our eyes met. And everything we'd been burying crashed to the surface. The room seemed to tilt. The world narrowed to just him, just me, just the unbearable space between us. I took a shaky breath. Opened my mouth to say something, anything. But Frank moved first. His hand cupped my cheek. Gentle. Trembling. I froze. Not because I was afraid. But because I was waiting. Waiting for him to realize this was wrong. Waiting for him to pull away. He didn't. His thumb brushed my skin. Soft. Reverent. Like he was memorizing the feeling. Like he already knew he shouldn't get to keep it. I leaned into his touch. Closed my eyes. And for a moment. Just a moment. There was nothing but warmth. Nothing but the sweet, aching lie that maybe this could be enough. But lies don't last. They never do. Frank dropped his hand like it burned him. Staggered back. His face twisted in agony. In guilt so heavy it filled the whole room. "God, what am I doing?" he rasped. I opened my eyes. Felt the cold rush in where his touch had been. "I'm sorry," he said, over and over, like a broken record. "I'm so sorry." Then he was gone. Out the door. Into the rain. I stood there. Hands shaking. Heart bleeding. And for the first time I wasn't sure who I hated more. Him. Or myself. The days that followed were worse than before. Frank avoided me completely. Didn't come home some nights. When he did, he barely spoke to my mother. Barely looked at me. The house felt hollow. Rotting from the inside out. I wandered from room to room, touching things. Trying to remember what it had felt like to be safe here. It didn't work. I found myself back in the attic. Drawn there like a moth to a flame. I dug through the old boxes. Ripping them open with shaking hands. Looking for... I don't even know what. Answers, maybe. Or some proof that this was all a nightmare. Instead, I found something worse. A folder. Tucked deep under a pile of books. Inside were court papers. Police reports. Medical records. I sat on the dusty floor, flipping through them. Each page cutting deeper than the last. Emily. It was all about Emily. And what happened to her? She hadn't died in an accident, like I always assumed. She hadn't died of sickness. No. She had been taken from Frank. Taken after a long, messy custody battle. The reports painted an ugly picture. Words like neglect. Unstable environment. Potential harm. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped the folder. But it was the last paper that made my blood run cold. A therapist's note. Scrawled in messy handwriting. Child displays signs of emotional attachment disorder. Potential inappropriate boundaries noted with primary caregiver, father figure. Recommended supervised visitation only. I dropped the paper. Stared at it like it might catch fire. Inappropriate boundaries. Father figure. I pressed my fists to my mouth to keep from screaming. The world tilted. Shattered. Everything made a sick kind of sense now. The way Frank looked at me. The way he touched me, and then hated himself for it. It wasn't new. It wasn't me. It was a cycle. A wound that never healed. A sickness he never escaped. And I had walked straight into it. Worse. I had wanted it. I stumbled to my feet. Shoved the papers back into the folder. Buried it at the bottom of the box. Buried the truth right along with it. When I finally looked at myself in the attic mirror, I didn't recognize the girl staring back. Eyes too wide. Skin too pale. A mouth that trembled with words she could never say. What had I become? Or maybe the better question was, what had he made me? I avoided him for days. Stayed locked in my room. Windows shut. Curtains drawn. As if the darkness could hide what I knew now. As if it could erase the part of me that still wanted him. Even knowing. Even after everything. But hunger doesn't die just because you starve it. It festers. It grows teeth. And so did mine. It was a Friday night when it happened. When the dam broke. The house was too quiet. The air too thick. I heard the front door open. Keys clattering on the table. Heavy boots thudding against the floor. Frank. I pressed my hands to my ears. Tried to drown him out. Tried to drown myself out. It didn't work. A knock on my door. Soft. Hesitant. I said nothing. Held my breath. But he opened it anyway. I sat on the bed, stiff as stone. Back ramrod straight. Hands clenched into fists in my lap. He stood in the doorway. Rain dripping from his jacket. Hair plastered to his forehead. He looked destroyed. Like he hadn't slept in days. Like he hadn't eaten in longer. His eyes locked onto mine. And I saw it. The guilt. The longing. The shame. All of it, tangled together in a noose around his throat. He stepped inside. Closed the door behind him. Slow. Careful. Like approaching a wild animal. I should have screamed. Should have thrown something. Should have run. I did nothing. Only watched him. Watched the ruin he had become. I can't do this anymore, he said. Voice rough. Splintered. I can't stay away from you. I squeezed my eyes shut. Shook my head. No, I whispered. You can't say that. You can't. But he kept coming. Closer. Closer. Until he was kneeling in front of me. Hands hovering at my knees. I tried, he said. Tears in his voice. In his eyes. I swear to God, I tried. I opened my mouth to tell him to leave. To tell him this was wrong. To tell him I hated him. But what came out was a sob. Ugly. Raw. And he caught it in his hands. Caught me. Pulled me into his arms. I fought him. Beat my fists against his chest. Scratched at his shirt. But he didn't let go. Didn't flinch. He just held me. Rocked me. Like he was trying to rock the sickness out of both of us. When my anger burned out, only ashes remained. And in those ashes, the truth. I loved him. God help me, I loved him. Not like a daughter loves her father. Not like a stepdaughter loves her stepfather. I loved him like a woman loves the man who ruined her. And he loved me too. Twisted. Poisonous. But real. His hands trembled as they stroked my hair. His lips pressed against my forehead. Not innocent. Not pure. Claiming. Consuming. I clung to him. Desperate. Starved. Please, I whispered. Don't leave me. He made a broken sound. Buried his face against my shoulder. I won't, he said. I can't. We stayed like that. Two broken things, clinging to each other in a world that had already given up on us. And maybe it could have ended there. Maybe we could have drowned together, quietly. But fate isn't merciful. Fate rips the rod into the light. Because that night, the phone rang. Frank stiffened. Pulled away. I watched him cross the room. Pick up the receiver. I watched the blood drain from his face. Yes, he said. Voice thin. Cracked. Yes, I understand. He hung up slowly. Turned to me. And in his eyes, I saw it. The end. What is it? I asked. My voice sounded small. Childish. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Then he said, "Your mother's coming home." Relief flooded me. Sick and sharp. Of course she was. Of course she would save us. But Frank didn't look relieved. He looked terrified. He crossed back to me. Fell to his knees again. Gripped my hand so tightly it hurt. There's something I have to tell you, he said. The world tilted. Again. No, I whispered. I don't want to know. But he said it anyway. I knew your mother long before you were born, he said. Breathless. I knew her when she was just a girl. I stared at him. Uncomprehending. He squeezed my hands harder. Frantic now. We were together, he said. We had a child. I stopped breathing. No, I said. No, that's not. You, he said. You're mine. The floor fell away beneath me. For a long time I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Didn't blink. I just sat there, feeling the words sink into me. Rotting me from the inside out. You're mine. Not hers. Not anyone else's. His. Frank was still talking. Saying something about the past. About mistakes. About how he tried to do better. I couldn't hear him. His voice sounded like it was coming through water. Muffled. Distant. The blood in my ears roared louder. Louder. I wrenched my hands out of his grip. Stumbled back like I'd been struck. No, I said. My voice was shaking. Weak. He reached for me again. Pleading. Please, listen to me. But I couldn't. I couldn't hear anything except the scream building in my chest. The scream of a life that had just been torn apart at the seams. You knew, I whispered. Tears spilling down my face. You knew all along. He nodded. Miserable. Broken. I tried to stay away, he said. I tried so hard. But you didn't, I spat. You didn't. I pressed my hands to my mouth, trying to hold myself together. But it was too late. I was unraveling. Falling apart in 1,000 bleeding pieces. The man I loved. The man I trusted. Was my father. My blood. And worse. He had loved me too. Not like a father should. Not like a protector. Not like anything good or pure. He had loved me the way no one should ever love a daughter. I stumbled toward the door. Frank moved to block me. Hands out. Desperate. Please don't tell her, he said. I'll leave. I'll disappear. Just, don't tell her. I stared at him. This man. This stranger. The one who had held me when I cried. The one who had kissed my forehead at night. The one who had buried his face in my neck and whispered broken promises. I shoved past him. Ran. Down the stairs. Out the door. Into the cold, wet night. The rain hit me like knives. Cold and sharp. Washing nothing away. I didn't know where I was going. Didn't care. I just ran. Until my lungs burned. Until my legs gave out. I collapsed by the old oak tree at the edge of the property. The one Frank had built a swing for me on when I was little. The one I used to think was magic. I curled up in the mud. Let the rain soak me. Let the world disappear. Somewhere, far away, I heard a car pull up. A door slam. Voices shouting. Arguing. My mother. Frank. I didn't move. Didn't answer. Let them tear each other apart. They deserved each other. Two liars. Two destroyers. I closed my eyes. I didn't want to see anymore. It was hours before someone found me. One of the neighbors. They wrapped me in a blanket. Called the police. Frank was gone by then. Vanished into the night. Like a ghost. My mother sat beside me in the hospital. Holding my hand. Whispering apologies I didn't want to hear. I didn't know, she kept saying. I swear to God, I didn't know. But I didn't believe her. Not really. Some part of her had to know. Had to feel it. The wrongness of it all. And she let it happen anyway. Because it was easier. Because it was safer. Because pretending is always easier than facing the truth. The days that followed blurred together. Therapy sessions. Police interviews. Court dates whispered about behind closed doors. I told them what they needed to hear. Enough to get them to leave me alone. Enough to make them think I could be fixed. I couldn't. Some wounds never heal. They just fester quietly. Deep down where no one can see. I stopped speaking to my mother. Stopped looking at her. We lived like strangers under the same roof. Passing each other like ghosts. She tried to make it better. Cooking meals I didn't eat. Leaving flowers by my door. But it was too late. She had already buried me. The girl I used to be. The girl who believed in bedtime stories. The girl who thought love was safe. She was gone. Dead and rotting under the weight of secrets. Sometimes, late at night, I still feel him. Frank. In the walls. In the floorboards. In the hollow ache of my chest. Sometimes I wonder if I loved him because I was broken. Or if I was broken because I loved him. It doesn't matter now. The end is the same either way. I am my father's daughter. And nothing will ever change that. Some scars don't fade. They sink deeper. Beneath skin. Beneath bone. Into the parts of you that words can't reach. I learned how to smile again. How to speak. How to pretend. But it was all a trick. An illusion stitched together with trembling hands. Inside, I was still lying under that oak tree. Still 17. Still shattered. I left home a year later. Took whatever I could carry and didn't look back. My mother cried when I walked out the door. Begged me to stay. But I was already gone. Had been for a long time. I found a small apartment in a city where no one knew my name. Got a job waiting tables. Spent my nights drinking cheap wine alone in my kitchen. It was easier that way. Easier to forget. Easier to bleed quietly, where no one could see. Sometimes men would smile at me. Handsome ones. Dangerous ones. And for a moment, I would feel something stir. Something hopeful. Something alive. But it never lasted. Because every time I let someone get too close. Every time I felt a hand brush my skin. Every time lips touched mine. I saw him. Frank. His hands. His mouth. His voice. And the sickness would rise up and choke me all over again. I started pushing people away. Harder. Crueler. Until there was no one left. Just me. And the ghosts. I tried therapy. Sat in stiff chairs under fluorescent lights. Told the sanitized version of the story to women with kind eyes and notebooks. They nodded. Asked the right questions. Prescribed pills that dulled everything into a gray hum. But they couldn't cut it out of me. The rot. The hunger. Because deep down, part of me still missed him. Still missed the way he made me feel seen. Wanted. Important. Even if it was wrong. Especially because it was wrong. No amount of medicine can erase that kind of poison. One night, drunk and half asleep on the floor of my apartment, I called his number. It rang once. Twice. Then a dead line. Disconnected. I curled around the phone and cried. Ugly, broken sobs that tore my throat raw. I wanted to hate him. God, I wanted to. But it's hard to hate the only person who ever made you feel alive. Even if they destroyed you in the process. Years passed. The city grew louder. I grew quieter. People came and went. Jobs. Apartments. Faces. Nothing stuck. Nothing mattered. Sometimes, in the early hours before dawn, I would dream of him. Of the way he looked at me. The way he touched me. And I would wake up soaked in sweat and shame. Hating myself. Hating him. Hating the universe that stitched us together in blood and betrayal. I heard rumors once. Whispers from a neighbor back home. Frank had died. Somewhere far away. Alone. No funeral. No grave. Just gone. Like a bad dream slipping through your fingers. I should have felt relief. Closure. Instead, all I felt was a hollow, yawning ache. Because he was the only one who knew me. The real me. The ruined me. And now he was gone. And I was truly alone. Some nights, when the silence gets too loud, I sit by the window. I watch the rain streak down the glass. I imagine him standing there. On the other side. Waiting. Not with anger. Not with shame. But with the same broken, desperate love that destroyed us both. And in those moments, I almost open the door. Almost. But I don't. I can't. Because love isn't always salvation. Sometimes, it's the thing that drags you to hell. And I've lived there long enough. If you're hearing this, it means I finally found the courage to speak. To open the last, locked door inside me. This is my confession. My funeral song. The last piece of me I have left to give. I loved him. God help me, I did. Not because he was good. Not because he deserved it. But because he saw the broken pieces of me. And loved them anyway. Even when he shouldn't have. Especially when he shouldn't have. I spent years trying to bury it. Smother it. Kill it. But love like that doesn't die. It festers. It transforms. It becomes something monstrous and eternal. I carry him inside me. Everywhere I go. In the way I flinch from kindness. In the way I crave the sharp sting of loneliness. In the way I destroy everything that tries to love me. He is the wound that never closed. The ghost that never left. People like to think there's always a clear villain. A monster to blame. A hero to save the day. But real life isn't like that. Real life is messy. Complicated. Full of people who hurt each other while trying to love each other. Frank wasn't just my abuser. He was my father. My first love. My ruin. And I was complicit. I let it happen. I wanted it. I begged for it. At least, that's what the cruel voice inside me whispers late at night. But I was just a girl. starving for affection, drowning in loneliness. He fed me poison and called it love. And I drank it. I drank every last drop. If you're looking for a neat ending, a happy ever after, you won't find it here. There are no heroes in this story. Only casualties. Only ashes. I survived. But survival isn't the same as healing. Some of us don't heal. We just learn to live around the wounds. So if you're listening now, if you feel broken, if you feel like your story is too dark to ever be forgiven, I see you. I know you. You are not alone. We are all just walking wounds, trying to find our way home. Thank you for sitting with me through the darkness, for not looking away. Your presence here means more than you know, more than I can ever say. If this story touched something inside you, if it made you feel seen, even just a little, I'd love for you to leave a small sign, a comment, a like, a quiet word. Let's build a place where broken souls can breathe together, where silence isn't the only answer. And if you want to hear more stories from the edges of pain and love, stay close. There's more coming. More truths. More nights like this. I'll be here, waiting for you. Always.